Revealed, how a family of 5 endured an incredible Victorian snowstorm with no heat for 30 days. The wind screamed through the small Midwestern town of Maplewood, drowning the world in white fury. As snow piled high against the humble Anderson home, 5 resilient souls faced more than just the cold. They battled the biting isolation that wrapped around them like the icy gusts outside. Samuel's jaw clenched with determination, a ghost of the soldier he had once been in the Civil War. Each blizzard-blown swirl of snow reminded him of the chaos of battle, but now it was his family that hung in the balance. The hearth lay cold. Eliza, his ambitious wife, tended to their children with a fierce love that flickered like the dwindling candles lighting their dark, frost-bitten home. She dreamed of a warmer future beyond the frozen confines of their stubborn reality, but doubts crept in like the chill. "What if no one hears our cries in the storm?" she whispered to Samuel, eyes brimming with unshed tears. She longed for a better life that seemed to slip further away with each howling gust of wind. Jacob, their eldest son, wrestled with his own daunting responsibilities. Just 15, he felt the weight of the winter upon his shoulders. As provisions dwindled and he stretched the meager scraps of food, his heart raced with the needs of his younger siblings. "We'll be okay," he told them, his own voice betraying the panic clawing at his insides. The weight of protection clashed violently with an irrepressible yearning for adventure, a desire bubbling just beneath the surface. With neighbors' shutters drawn tight against the snow's relentless wrath, the town's warmth dissipated, crumbling into stark divisions. Maplewood's wealthier citizens cheered in the comfort of their homes while the Andersons silently suffered, forgotten. Each day that passed felt heavier, opposites pulling at their unity, fear wrapping tighter around their throats like a noose. With each gust of wind, the air thickened, and Jacob's resolve crystallized. "I have to do it," he declared one frosty evening, heart pounding. "I'll go for help." His plan sparked a mix of awe and horror. The thought of his son braving the blizzard was both noble and reckless. Eliza shook her head, frightened. "You'll freeze before you even reach town," she cried, while Samuel clenched his fists, torn between pride and fear for his boy's life. "Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the storm roared louder, snowflakes dancing ferociously outside, Jacob felt his heart leap into a chasm of uncertainty. Would his bravery be enough to pierce through nature's raging wrath? Would he return, or would he become another lost whisper in the winds? The family's fates hung on the thinnest thread, a balance between hope and desolation. Jacob took a deep breath, gazing at his siblings who needed him more than ever. The storm outside was nothing compared to the tempest swelling in his chest. But if he could make it just beyond the door, would they find the warmth of a neighbor's heart, or stand alone against the storm that threatened to tear them apart? Jacob tightened his scarf and glanced back at his family, their frightened faces etched into his mind. The dim candlelight barely illuminated the room, shadows creeping into corners like phantoms. He took one last breath, imbued with the scent of damp wood and despair, before stepping toward the door. Eliza's hand shot out, gripping his arm. "Please, Jacob, don't do this." Her voice trembled, raw with emotion. "You're just a boy. You can't fight against this storm." "I have to," Jacob replied softly, feeling the weight of her worry in each syllable. "If I don't try, we might never get help. We can't just sit here and wait." Samuel, standing resolute as a soldier preparing for battle, placed a hand on Jacob's shoulder, grounding him. "Son, if you're determined to go, then promise me you'll stay low to the ground. Move along the trees if you can. Don't let the wind take you. We'll be here waiting for you." With a nod that felt like a promise to the wind itself, Jacob opened the door. A feral howl rushed in, cold and furious. Snow engulfed him instantly, fierce and blinding. He hesitated, heart pounding, the warmth of his family's love battling against the icy grip of doubt. Each step was a struggle as he forged ahead, the biting wind clawing at his skin while the snow swirled around him like angry spirits. He kept his eyes down, obeying his father's words. The world was a swirling vortex of white and shadow, and in that chaos, he felt small and minutes blurred into what felt like eternity. Jacob stumbled through drifts that swallowed his legs, but he pressed on, the thought of Eliza and his younger siblings urging him forward. They needed him. He could almost hear their laughter over the wind, a sweet memory to clutch as his hands grew numb. After what felt like hours, he spotted the flicker of a lantern far down the road. The light beckoned with hope, a guiding star amid this storm. A surge of energy shot through him, propelling him toward that faint glow. Just as he maneuvered closer, he heard a terrified scream pierce through the storm. Jacob halted, heart sinking. "No," he murmured, dread pooling in his stomach. The scream echoed again, and without thinking, he took off in the direction of the sound. Through the swirling snow, he stumbled upon a small figure struggling under the weight of snow piled high. "Help!" a voice cried again, desperate and hoarse. Jacob raced toward the voice, digging with his bare hands until he uncovered a small girl, her cheeks flushed and eyes wide with fear. "I thought I was lost," she gasped. Please help me." Torn between the urgency of returning home and this child's plight, Jacob swallowed hard. Somewhere in his heart, some deeper instinct told him it wasn't just about his family anymore. "I've got you," he said, locking eyes with her, but would saving her cost him the chance to save his own? Time became a thief as he dragged her from the snow, a decision paved with uncertainty. What awaited them both beyond the storm? As they stood together in hushed disbelief of what they had just faced, the howl of the wind rose ominously, whispering promises of trials yet to come. Would the warmth of salvation embrace them, or would they be consumed in the white fury that surrounded them? Ultimately, the storm had woven more into Jacob's fate than he had bargained for. Jacob held the girl tightly, her small frame trembling against the onslaught of cold. He glanced back in the direction he had been headed, then back to her frightened face, which was framed by a halo of spun snow. "What's your name?" he asked, hoping to calm her fears. "Lily," she whispered, wrapping her arms around herself in a futile attempt to keep warm. "Lily," he repeated, absorbing the weight of her name. It was a flicker of warmth in the encircling chill. "You're going to be okay. We'll get out of here together." With renewed determination, Jacob took her hand. It felt fragile in his grasp, yet he couldn't let her go. "We need to find shelter," he said, surveying the landscape around them. The lantern light in the distance still glimmered, a promise of safety. He let go of her hand briefly to sweep away some of the snow that lay thickly on her coat. "Can you walk?" he asked, anxiety tugging at his chest. I think so," she hesitated, but he could see the determination behind her fear. "Good," he said, his voice steady. "We just have to stay close and keep moving." They started trudging through the heavy snow, each step a battle against the whirling winds that seemed to push back with a viciousness that felt alive. Jacob kept his eyes locked on the lantern. It felt like a beacon, guiding him not just toward safety, but toward hope. With every step, he imagined his family waiting, their faces lit with worry and faith, waiting for his return. The wind howled louder, almost mocking their struggle. "What are you doing out here?" Jacob shouted over the roar, glancing down at the girl. "Where are your parents?" Lily shivered, her voice barely audible. "I was playing. I didn't think it would get so bad. I got lost." A hollow feeling opened within him. This little girl, alone in this storm, mirrored the fear that crept into his own heart when he thought about his family. He wanted to reassure her, to tell her things would be all right, but uncertainty gnawed at him. Could he truly protect her while also making it home? Just in that moment, the lantern flickered more violently, and Jacob's heart raced. Come on, he urged, pulling her along. They pushed forward, determination fueling their every step. But the farther they moved from their original path, the more the storm threatened to engulf them. It felt almost conspiratorial, as if the snow conspired to separate him from his goals, pulling them both into its embrace of silence and white despair. As they stumbled closer, Jacob felt a flicker of terror. What if the light was nothing more than a mirage, a trick pulled by the storm? He swallowed hard against the thought. Keep going, Lily. Just a little farther. Finally, they reached the source of the flicker. A small cabin, barely visible beneath the layers of snow. Shutters rattled in the wind, and a thin plume of smoke curled from the chimney. Relief washed over him, but hesitation followed closely behind. What if there's nobody inside? Jacob asked. I don't know, Lily said, a fear returning to her voice. What if they're bad people? His heart raced. We can't stay out here. In that moment of uncertainty, Jacob realized he was no longer just fighting for himself or even his family. He was fighting for Lily too. A new sense of purpose filled him, fueling his resolve. As they stood at the door, Jacob hesitated, his hand hovering over the icy handle. What awaited them inside? Would they find warmth, or would this be another struggle against hidden dangers? He took a deep breath, knowing that trust now hung delicately on the edge of a decision. Are you ready, Lily? He asked, his voice steadier than he felt. When she nodded, they pushed the door open to the unknown. What would they discover within the cabin? Would it be their salvation or yet another challenge? The door creaked open, revealing a dim interior lit only by the flickering glow of a dying fire in the stone hearth. Jacob hurriedly stepped inside, pulling Lily along with him, the bitter wind cutting off as they closed the door behind them. The brief silence that followed felt like a fragile gift, a stark contrast to the howling storm outside. The cabin smelled of damp wood and something sweet, a faint hint of cinnamon lingering in the air. Jacob squinted, trying to make sense of the shadows playing on the walls. Old photographs hung crookedly, their subjects obscured by dust. A tattered rug lay in front of the fireplace, lovingly worn. It felt like a place that had once thrived. Hello? He called out cautiously, his voice unsteady. Silence stretched back at him, heavy and expectant. Jacob's heart raced as he scanned the room for signs of life. What if it was deserted? What if they had just walked into a trap? Panic surged, but he pushed it down. One step at a time. Lily clutched his hand tightly, her warm breath visible in the cool air. Do you think anyone is here? She whispered, looking up at him with wide eyes. I don't know, he admitted softly. But it's better than being outside. We'll figure it out. They made their way further inside, the floor creaking under their weight. A lantern sat on a table, its wick extinguished. The shadows seemed to shift around them, making every creak sound like a whisper of caution. Jacob felt an unsettling chill, but he fought it back. He had to stay strong for Lily. Let us start a fire, he suggested, turning toward the hearth. The fire pit was filled with kindling and logs, remnants of past warmth. With shaking hands, he began to stoke the embers, hoping to coax them back to life. Lily knelt beside him, her small fingers brushing through the ashes. Can I help? She asked, her voice reflecting both eagerness and fear. Of course, he said, smiling down at her. Hand me those sticks. Together, they worked, finding matches tucked away in a drawer, and soon, dancing flames flickered to life. Jacob felt a wave of relief wash over him. The warmth enveloped them, a stark contrast to the frost still clinging to their clothes. As they settled down, the scent of wood smoke began to fill the cabin, mingling with the sweetness of some forgotten spice. If we can just stay warm, we can wait out the storm, Jacob reassured, leaning back against the stone wall. Lily looked around, her eyes reckless with admiration. It feels nice in here, she remarked, biting her lip as she glanced at their temporary haven. Like a storybook. Jacob chuckled, the sound echoing softly against the walls. Yeah, sort of like an adventure. Just without, the dragons. A faint smile broke across her face, her innocence shining like a flicker of sunshine through the storm clouds. But the laughter faded quickly as worry returned. Jacob let out a sigh, rubbing the back of his neck. Do you think your parents are looking for you? Lily's smile faltered. I hope so. But, what if they can't find me? Hearing her fear struck Jacob hard. The thought that they might both be lost in this storm, not just in the snow, but in the darker shadows of their uncertainty, snagged at his heart. He wanted to promise her everything would be all right, but doubt lingered in the back of his mind. Taking a deep breath, he adjusted the logs in the fire slightly, sending sparks into the air. We'll find them, Lily. I promise. I won't let anything happen to you. Just then, a distant noise interrupted their quiet moment. A thud echoed from outside, drawing Jacob's attention. Instinctively, his body tensed. Did you hear that? He asked, eyes wide. Lily nodded, her earlier bravery slipping away. What was it? Jacob stood slowly, moving toward the door again, the weight of uncertainty heavy in the air. What lay beyond? What could be out in the snow? As he cracked the door open, the wind howled anew, and there it was again, a sound that chilled him more than the cold. A faint voice, calling out, "Hello? Is anyone in there?" Who could it be? Were they friend or foe? Jacob turned back to Lily, both of their hearts pounding, caught between fear and hope in a snowstorm that threatened to change everything. Jacob's heart raced as the voice echoed from the storm. It wasn't just the cold air sending chills down his spine, it was the uncertainty that weighed heavily on him. He glanced back at Lily, searching her face for reassurance, but saw only innocence mixed with fear. Stay here, he whispered, though he hardly believed it. The comforting flames flickered behind him, their warmth drawing him back as much as the shadows loomed larger outside. With a deep breath, Jacob opened the door just a crack, peering into the swirling white beyond. The wind whipped against his face, stinging his cheeks, and he squinted into the blizzard. He shouted, "Who's there?" The voice answered again, closer now, a haunting blend of desperation and relief. "Please, I'm lost. I need help." The urgency in the stranger's voice twisted something inside Jacob. He could feel a pull, a sense of responsibility. But he also felt the weight of Lily's presence beckoning for his safety. "Lily, stay right here," he repeated, this time with a firmer edge of authority. "Please, Jacob," she pleaded softly. He hesitated, caught between the storm and the fire. Without another thought, he unlatched the door and threw it open. The wind howled, icy fingers reaching into the cabin. Jacob stepped halfway out, holding the door, half his body in the warmth, half in the fury. And then he saw her. A figure stumbled through the snow, wrapped in layers of tattered clothing, her hair a wild halo around her face. "I thought I was going to die out there. Come inside," Jacob shouted, waving her forward. The woman, gaunt and shivering, lunged into the shelter, falling to the floor as Jacob caught her wrist in time to prevent her from collapsing entirely. He felt her cold skin against his fingers, sending a shock through him. "Lily, get the blankets," he instructed as he helped the woman to a sitting position. The fire crackled behind them, illuminating her dim expression, and he could see the exhaustion within her deep-set eyes. Lily shot across the cabin, grabbing an old quilt from a nearby shelf, her small hands quick with purpose. She returned, wrapping it around the stranger's shoulders. The woman's teeth chattered as she clutched the fabric close, relief flooding her face. "Thank you, I thought I was all alone," she gasped, collapsing back against the wall, her breaths coming steadier, if still labored. Jacob knelt beside her, desperate to understand. "What happened? How did you end up out there?" "A storm hit," she began, pulling the quilt tighter as she started to regain some warmth. "I was separated from my family." We were trying to find shelter. For a moment, Jacob felt a flicker of kinship with this stranger. The same fear they both felt of being lost, of losing someone they loved, connected them in that dim cabin against the raging storm. "Where are they?" Jacob asked softly, heart pounding not just with fear, but with a flicker of hope. "I don't know," she whispered, eyes brimming with tears. "I thought the storm would take them too." Lily's small voice interrupted, almost a whisper, "Is your family coming to find you?" The woman looked at the little girl, her expression softening. I hope they are." Shock flooded Jacob. He thought of his own promise to Lily. They had to be strong, they had to hold on to hope. "We'll help you find them," he said, more emphatically than he felt. "We'll find them together." As the three of them huddled in the flickering glow of the fire, the sounds of the storm outside faded. But Jacob felt the weight of something else growing, a new wave of responsibility pressing against his chest. What if they couldn't find her family? What if the storm never let up? As Jacob considered their uncertain future, another noise came from outside, a thud followed by muffled voices muffled against the wind. He turned sharply, nerves screaming. More people? Or could it be danger? "Lily," he whispered urgently, "stay close." But even as he spoke, anxiety clawed at his mind. What if the next voice he heard was from someone they should fear? The wind howled, every second seemed to stretch. Would they dare to open the door again? Jacob held his breath, straining to listen past the howling wind. The thuds grew louder, echoing in the hollow cabin. The weight of the responsibility for both Lily and the stranger pressed against him like the drifting snow outside. He felt his heart thump erratically, each beat merging with the chaos around them. "Stay here," he whispered again, looking down at Lily, whose eyes were wide with worry. But she didn't move. She clung to the wall, her petite form trembling, urging him to make a decision. A shout broke through the storm. "Help! Someone, please!" It was frantic, layered with desperation. Jacob's grip tightened on the doorframe. The pang of urgency danced with his uncertainty. Were they saving lives or inviting danger? "Jacob, please. We have to help them." Lily's voice was soft but steady, pulling him from his thoughts. He turned back to find the stranger, still curled against the wall, her gaze flickering between the door and the flames. "Could it be my family?" she murmured, hope glimmering in her eyes. "Listen to her," Jacob said, feeling his resolve waver. "What if they're the only chance for her? Or they could be dangerous," he muttered to himself, the struggle a tempest of its own within him. Another shout made the cabin shudder. "Is anyone in there? We need shelter." The voice belonged to a man but was accompanied by faint voices that filled the night air. "Jacob," Lily pleaded again, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. Swallowing hard, he felt the weight of the moment stretch out before him. "All right," he finally said, pushing the door open just enough to catch a glimpse of the storm's maelstrom outside. "I'll check." The howling wind rushed in, the storm clawing at him as he took a cautious step onto the porch. Snow swirled around, obscuring his vision, but there they were, figures struggling against the wind. "Help!" A tall man broke free from the snow-encrusted chaos, flanked by two children. Their faces were flushed, eyes wide with panic and exhaustion. "Get inside!" Jacob shouted, waving them toward him. He felt hope igniting in his chest, bolstered by the sight of their weather-beaten faces. As they stumbled closer, he could see the children were scared, shivering through their thin coats. Jacob's heart yearned for them. One girl, no older than Lily, clung tightly to her father, her eyes filled with tears. They poured into the cabin, pushing past Jacob and collapsing onto the floor, where the warmth of the fire met their frigid skin. "Close the door!" the father yelled, pulling the children close. Jacob rushed back to shut it, the world outside becoming a distant roar. Inside, the fatigue of the newcomers hung heavy in the air. "Thank God, we thought we'd never find shelter," the man gasped. The reality of what they had escaped rolled off him like the snow from their coats. Jacob stood back, watching the scene unfold. The stranger looked up, her eyes widening as she caught a glimpse of the family. You're safe?" She managed to stammer, hope fluttering in her chest. Yes. We're here," the father confirmed, looking back toward his family, who huddled together. The mother, still outside, poked her head in. Her face held both relief and worry, eyes scanning for something, her children, perhaps, or an escape from the chaos. Jacob caught his breath as he moved aside, letting the reality sink in. There was magic in how they all crowded together, sharing warmth, sharing weight, the common thread of survival threading them into an undeniable bond. Around the fire, the woman's gaze darted between the father and her own hollow despair, realizing the potential that had just entered their lives. But would they all blend into this fragile sanctuary, or would past ties and lost families tear them apart again? Then came another thud, heavy on the door, a reminder that whoever stood outside might change everything once more. Jacob tensed, heart thudding painfully. This time, would they open the door to fate or to fear? Jacob's pulse raced as the thud reverberated through the cabin. He exchanged glances with Lily and the stranger, whose name he still didn't know. The room felt electric with tension, breath held around the dancing flames. The father, still on the floor, gathered his children close. "Stay put, kids," he said, determination lacing his voice. The boy and girl nodded, eyes wide, hearts pounding. Jacob's instincts screamed at him, fear and hope tangled together. "Do you think they need help too?" Lily whispered, her small hand gripping Jacob's arm, her voice a threadbare echo in the thick air. Maybe. Jacob breathed, torn. He didn't want to risk everything again. But the sound of frantic knocking intensified, a reminder of the storm outside, a relentless beast they couldn't ignore. The stranger, her eyes flicking between the door and the newcomers, finally gathered her composure. "We shouldn't leave them out there. If they're brave enough to knock, they must be in trouble." The father nodded in agreement. "I agree. But first, does anyone have a weapon?" They all turned to Jacob, who felt the weight of their expectations settle on him. He shook his head. There was nothing to defend himself with, aside from a handful of firewood. Lily's grip tightened. "But what if it's just more people needing help?" "Not everyone looking for help has good intentions," Jacob replied, a chill racing down his spine. "But we can't just leave them." Before he could decide, the heavy thud came again, along with a voice that made his stomach drop. "Please. We're freezing. We just want to come in." Is that your family?" the stranger asked, her gaze searching the father's face. He glanced over at her, confusion etched into his features as he pulled his children a shade closer. "I don't know," he said slowly, leaning toward the door. "But if they're in trouble, it might be worth the risk. Are we seriously thinking about opening this door?" Jacob's voice cracked slightly, disbelief washing over him. "Yes," the father replied firmly. "We can't turn our backs on them. We're all human." Jacob felt the weight of the world sitting on his shoulders. "Okay, let us do this." The father shifted, resolved as he made his way to the door. Jacob held his breath, rattled, but found himself following closely behind. With a swift motion, the father flung open the door, snow swirling violently into the cabin. The freezing air pierced through like tiny daggers, but in that moment, he witnessed a sight that froze him in place. There, hunched against the relentless storm, were two more people, another man and a woman, both looking as haggard as the family inside. Their eyes widened, fear and gratitude lingering in the chaos of the storm. "Please," the man cried, voice breaking. "We can't stay out here. We're soaked, please let us in." Jacob felt torn apart inside. Another pair of lives at stake. Lily's grip returned to his arm, tighter than before. The father hadn't moved, calculating, weighing the risk against the hope. "Do we trust them?" he asked, a whisper forced between cold breaths. Trust, Jacob echoed, feeling the uncertainty twine around his heart. The cabin was suddenly not just a refuge from the storm, but a fragile arena of choices. Gazing at the new arrivals, he felt the fear swell, drowning out the warmth of the fire behind him. Could trust withstand the weight of survival, or would their hospitality shatter into pieces like glass? Jacob, let us stay united, the stranger said softly. What do you say? Together or divided? He hesitated, thoughts racing as another gust howled around them, spiraling hope and desperation around the cabin. Together, he finally said, but the doubt in his chest twisted as he knew the ramifications of this choice. The father took a deep breath and nodded. Then let us welcome them in. And just as they opened the door wider, icy winds dancing in, Jacob caught sight of something behind the newcomers, a shadow lurking in the dark. Panic seized his heart. What else was out there, waiting to breach their fragile sanctuary? The door swung wider, and the howling wind rushed into the cabin like a wild spirit unleashed. The father hesitated, caught between offering warmth and feeling the shiver of fear creeping up his spine. Jacob could see the newcomers' faces clearly now. The man was old, lined with worry, while the woman held a child close, swathed against the cold. Simon, get in. Jacob urged, his voice cracking slightly. The urgency in his tone must have resonated because the man pushed through first, pulling the child along with him, the woman trailing, glancing nervously over her shoulder. As the door closed behind them, Jacob's breath released in a shuddering plume. The cabin felt instantly more alive, yet he couldn't shake the unease. The small space was already cramped, and now it echoed with uncertainty. Thank you. Thank you. The man exclaimed, his gratitude spilling out like the warmth of the fire. We thought we were going to perish out there. Yeah, well, you're safe now, the father replied, his voice firm, though the concern flickered in the depths of his features. But it's too crowded, we should figure out how to make this work. Jacob's eyes darted around, trying to gauge the stranger's intentions. Another child, older than Lily, peeked from behind the woman, eyes darting nervously towards Jacob, then back to her parents. Are you okay? Jacob asked softly, touching the girl's shoulder gently. Her wide eyes seemed simply grateful for warmth. It was a flicker of hope amidst the storm brewing inside him. Lily, sensing the tension, stepped over to the cluttered hearth. Look. We can all gather here by the fire, she said, trying to soften the mood. We still have hot soup. How do we tell them that? The stranger murmured, a mixture of determination and fear evident in her words. Jacob caught her eye, and they shared a knowing look. Survival depended on communication, the man nodded, his face softening as he responded to Lily's gesture. Thank you, little one. We're really hungry. He shivered as he moved closer to the hearth, the warmth starting to chase the chill from his bones. Okay, Jacob said, stepping forward to take charge. I'll help with the soup. He glanced at Lily, whose eyes sparkled with gratitude. Can you help me? Of course. She replied eagerly, and the two made their way to the kitchen area, leaving the adults fidgeting in the living space. As they stirred the soup together, the warmth of the steam filled their faces, easing the tight tension lingering in Jacob's chest. What if this all goes wrong? Jacob whispered to Lily, uncertain how to frame the shifting dynamics in the cabin. We can help them feel better, she responded, filling a bowl with steaming liquid. We're all scared together. Jacob marveled at her ability to simply see the best in the chaos. As he returned to the living space, he noticed the woman's eyes drift toward the door. Are you all right? He asked, offering her the bowl. I can't shake the feeling that we're not alone, she said, her voice wavering. The child in her arms shifted, sensing the tension, panic surged through Jacob again. The shadow he'd glimpsed didn't leave his mind. Maybe it's just my imagination? He suggested weakly, hoping it was true, but the newcomer's eyes darted anxiously to the door. No, I think you're right. Something else is out there. The whispers of storm winds reached them, a devilish reminder of what lay beyond their sanctuary. As their eyes met with shared dread, Jacob knew they had to stay vigilant. With all these strangers, unknowns huddled together, would they be able to weather not just the storm outside, but whatever dark forces lurked beyond? In that moment, he realized the core of survival was not just keeping warm, but in the shadows cast by fear mingling with hope, a dance that could decide their fate. What could possibly emerge from the darkness? Would they find strength in each other, or would betrayal slip through the cracks? The fire crackled, filling the air with a sense of warmth that felt almost fragile. Jacob served the soup as best he could, his hands shaking slightly, and he made sure to keep an eye on the newcomers. They tucked into the bowls gratefully, but the atmosphere remained thick with unsaid fears. Lily sat close, her small body nearly vibrating with the energy of the moment. "Can we share stories?" she asked cheerfully, looking from the strangers back to her father. "It might help to distract us." "Good idea, Lily," the man replied, his voice softer now, perhaps warmed by the soup. "I'm Michael. This is my wife, Sarah," he motioned to the woman, who nodded, still clutching the child close. "And this is Lucy." The little girl peeked out, her shy smile lighting up her worried face. "I'm Jacob, and this is my sister, Lily," he replied, forcing a smile. "What brings you out this way?" Jacob asked, trying to keep the conversation alive. Michael glanced at Sarah. She took a deep breath. "We were heading to visit family. Our car got stuck in the snow. We thought we could make it." There was a tremor in her voice. "Then we had to abandon it. The wind picked up, and we lost our way." Jacob felt a chill run down his spine. "You're lucky to have made it here." "Luck," Sarah scoffed lightly. "Or maybe it was the wind guiding us to a safer place." Jacob's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "Before we found this cabin, we saw something, a shape in the trees. It felt like it was watching us." Her eyes glimmered with fear. A silence stretched across the cabin, and the fire popped loudly, like a warning shot through the tension. Jacob's mind raced, remembering the shadow he had caught a glimpse of. "We can't," Jacob began, glancing at the door, the howling wind underscoring the urgency. "We should check the windows. Make sure it's just the storm." Their eyes locked again, uncertainty hanging heavy in the air. But all at once, Lily broke the silence with her ever-present optimism. "How about a song?" "Now's not the time for that," Jacob said, but Lily's insistence was like a bomb over frayed nerves. "Please, just one little song." Before he could protest further, the little girl's voice rang out, soft and clear. "You sing it, Jacob." With a sigh, he relented and began to hum an old family tune. It was simple, one that he had learned from his mother, and gradually, the melody wrapped around them like a comforting blanket. To his surprise, even Michael joined in softly at first, and soon Sarah matched his steady voice. Lily chimed in with her bright notes, and Lucy's timid voice wavered next to her parents'. The room lightened, and for a moment, they were simply a group of people sharing warmth amidst the storm, but then it happened, a thud outside, the sound unmistakable. Jacob's heart raced. The singing faltered and ended in heavy silence as they all turned toward the door, eyes wide and breath caught. "What was that?" Lucy asked, her small voice barely a whisper. Jacob swallowed hard. I don't know." It was one thing to contemplate the darkness outside, but now the sound made it real. With adrenaline pumping, he moved toward the door, racing thoughts swirling. The shadows outside loomed large, and every instinct within him screamed to keep everyone safe. "Jacob, wait." But as Michael grabbed his arm, the cabin felt smaller, each breath tighter. What if it's something, someone? In that moment, the door creaked ominously, as if whatever was outside was testing their resolve. He hesitated, holding onto the handle as if it were the last thing tethering him to safety. Would he find what lurked beyond? Or would facing it unravel everything they had built in these desperate hours? The weight of the unknown hung heavily, and Jacob had to choose. Should he open the door and confront whatever threatened them, or retreat back into the safety of the cabin, hoping the storm would pass without further incident? What awaited him on the other side? Jacob stood there, breath caught in his throat, as he felt the pull of protection clawing at his heart. In those tick-tock seconds, every fear and hope collided in his mind. Behind him, the warmth of the fire flickered like a heartbeat, the thriving pulse of unity amidst their gathering uncertainty. "Jacob, don't." Lily's soft voice was threaded with worry, and her small hand gripped his arm tightly, anchoring him to the moment. "I can't just leave us in the dark," he replied quietly, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He could feel the weight of all eyes upon him, the shared breath of mistrust hanging thick in the air. With a determined exhale, he turned back to the door, hand steadying against the cold wood. "We can't hide forever," he murmured, the fear twisting the corners of his heart, blending it with a stubborn resolve. "We've come this far, all of us. Then let us stand together," Michael offered, stepping closer with his children nestled protectively beside him. "Whatever is out there, we deal with it as a family." That simple, heartfelt reminder reignited Jacob's strength. The bond they all shared, the hope, the desperation pushed against the trepidation. He felt the warmth of the fire at his back, not just against the cold, but as a reminder of the safety they'd built together. "Okay, on three," Jacob said, voice steady now as he glanced around at the faces, anxious yet resolved, a tapestry woven from shared suffering and courage. 1, 2, 3. He swung the door wide open, the wind shrieking in fierce protest as icy blasts threatened to snatch them away. Outside stood a figure familiar and harrowed, skin white against the storm. It was a woman, eyes wide with relief and surprise. "I found you," she called, voice rasping against the wind, her hand gripping the doorframe as she stumbled inside. "Mom!" Lucy cried, her small frame breaking free from her father's grasp as she darted forward, her joy breaking through the layers of frost. The mother dropped to her knees, embracing her child with tears that sparkled like crystals against the storm. "I thought I lost you," she wept, an avalanche of emotions cascading around them. The cabin pulsed with a surge of hope and warmth. Jacob felt his fate shifting once more. The woman who had been a specter of despair transformed into a beacon of connection. It wasn't just fear that filled the space, it was love, the deep, binding force that drew them all closer together, like a firm yet gentle embrace. Soon, they all huddled. The walls of the cabin now echoed with a mix of laughter, hesitant yet vibrant. "You're safe now, together," Sarah whispered, glancing at the reunion with wonder, her heart lighter with the knowledge of family restored. Tension faded into an electric warmth, the reality of their surroundings melting into the background. Jacob felt a stirring inside him, a peaceful sense that, despite the raging storm, they had survived as a community. They were no longer just separate souls chasing survival, they had woven a tapestry of togetherness, facing adversity with newfound love and trust. As the wind howled outside, joy flickered among the group. Jacob caught his sister's gaze, her eyes shining bright with life, beaming with the warmth of familial bonds. "We made it," she declared, joy overflowing like melted snow. With the fire crackling back to life, they gathered around, the scent of soup and warmth filling the room. Stories were shared, every voice added strength, laughter rising against the storm outside, ringing through the cabin. Even in a snowstorm, we can shine, Jacob thought, his heart swelling with pride, seeing their unity solidify into an unbreakable chain. And there, in that tiny cabin against the tempest, the Andersons and their newfound family embraced the power of togetherness. They were no longer bound by fear, but united by love, refusing to let the storm tear them apart. So as the winds continued to howl and the snow wrapped around the world outside, inside they were safe, wrapped in the magic of hope that shone brighter than any storm could extinguish. Life would begin anew once the sun broke forth from the clouds. If you felt that transformation, you need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support and join our journey. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, and comment your reactions and feelings about this ending. Don't wait not even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation together. We can spread hope.